Okay, stop scrolling. Yeah, you heard that right. Raven Symoné just dropped a bomb so big it makes Chernobyl look like a leaky AA battery. And trust me, if you thought Bill Cosby's rap sheet was already long enough to wallpaper your entire grandma's basement, oh baby, you haven't seen anything yet. Because according to Raven, the so-called America's dad wasn't just busy handing out Jell-O pudding pops and unsolicited life lessons. No, behind the laugh tracks, behind the sweaters, behind that fake fatherly smile was a monster. A monster with power, a monster with secrets, apparently, a monster with blood on his hands. Now, let me ask you this. What happens when a child star grows up, connects the dots, and decides she's done being silent? What happens when the truth is uglier than the lies Hollywood sold us for decades? And what happens when one of the most beloved sons of television, the clean-cut, good-hearted Malcolm Jamal Warner, doesn't just die, but gets erased, snuffed out, disappeared in what Raven is now calling straight-up murder? This isn't just scandal. This isn't just gossip. This is the kind of revelation that makes TMZ look like bedtime stories and turns Netflix true crime docs into Saturday morning cartoons. So grab your popcorn, grab your receipts, because what Raven just revealed could blow the lid off one of the biggest cover-ups in television history. Stay with me, because by the end of this video, you're not just going to question Bill Cosby, you're going to question every laugh track you've ever heard. So let's rewind, because to truly understand the storm unraveling right now, you have to see how deep the roots of this scandal go and how carefully it was all hidden in plain sight, wrapped in bright colors, warm laughter, and the illusion of family television that America trusted for decades. While behind the curtain shadows were moving, whispers were circling, and people were being silenced one by one until Raven Symoné, the little girl who was supposed to just smile, wave, and fade away, decided to finally break the silence and put every ugly secret into the light. Bill Cosby was not just a comedian, not just a father figure on TV. He was an empire, a machine fueled by money, networks, syndication deals, advertising, and the kind of power that makes people look away even when they know something is very, very wrong. He was invited into millions of living rooms every week, called America's dad. Yet behind that fatherly mask, Raven says he was controlling, intimidating, and capable of much worse than the world dared to believe. She remembers being followed, overhearing conversations that chilled her, seeing other cast members retreat into silence as though they were carrying a weight too heavy to share. And then there was Malcolm Jamal Warner, the clean-cut son of the show, beloved by audiences, respected by the industry, the one everyone thought was safe. But according to Raven, he was the one who saw too much, asked too many questions, eventually became too much of a threat to be allowed to keep talking. Imagine growing up on a set where laughter echoed through speakers, but behind closed doors, fear sat heavy in the air. Malcolm, Raven says, was bold enough to challenge Cosby's authority, to separate himself from the carefully polished image, to demand accountability and transparency, things no one dared to demand from the man who held everyone's career in his hand. That boldness didn't earn him respect. It earned him a target on his back. Raven remembers overhearing words she didn't fully understand at the time, but that haunt her now. Cosby saying quietly that Malcolm was getting too loud, and that sometimes loud voices had to be quieted. She was just a teenager. She didn't connect the dots. But years later, when Malcolm went on vacation with his family and never returned, drowning in an accident that felt far too convenient, the puzzle snapped together in her mind. Headlines painted it as tragedy. News outlets moved on quickly. The funeral was rushed. The investigation was brief and inconclusive. But Raven says she knew in her bones what had happened. That this wasn't just bad luck in the water. This was a silencing, a message, a warning to anyone else who might think about standing up against Cosby. And the chilling part is what happened afterward. Because according to Raven, Cosby himself called her directly after the news broke. And his words were simple, cold, unforgettable. Now you understand what happens when people talk." Then he hung up. That was the moment the fear inside her turned into fire. She cut ties, walked away from the industry, and for years stayed low. Not because she was hiding, but because she was gathering. She saved voicemails, recordings, emails. Anything she could that tied together the pattern of threats and cover-ups. Because she knew that one day the silence would end, and when it did, she needed to be ready. And here we are, decades later. The day she finally decided to open the vault. What she revealed isn't just disturbing, it is enough to make you question every smiling photo. Every rerun, every moment that you once thought was safe and innocent. Malcolm didn't just die, she says, he was erased. His encrypted files disappeared from his devices within hours of his death. Accessed remotely from an IP address traced not to Costa Rica where he was vacationing, but to Los Angeles. Blocks away from a property tied to one of Cosby's old lawyers. The so-called life insurance files he had told Raven about, the ones he said would keep him safe, vanished. Gone, deleted, replaced by a blank folder named Shut It. And while authorities shrugged, Raven knew exactly what that meant. Someone cleaned. How someone made sure that nothing survived that could expose what Malcolm had discovered. But fragments remained. A leaked clip from the set showing Malcolm and Cosby in a heated confrontation. Silent footage but unmistakable tension. Cosby red-faced, Malcolm refusing to back down. Walking away as Cosby mutters something under his breath that a technician later claimed was a threat. A memo from NBC dated days after the drowning that focused not on grief but on narrative management. Instructing staff to confirm accidental drowning, delay media inquiries, and most telling of all, ensure Warner Digital assets are accounted for. Assets, as in the very files that later vanished. And then there were the whispers of whistleblowers. Insiders hinting that Malcolm had been preparing to expose shady financial practices. Shell companies tied to Cosby's empire, deals signed. In the names of cast members without their consent, Raven included. Money moving through channels that would crumble reputations and empires if revealed. It was too much, too dangerous, too close to blowing open. So, instead of justice, Malcolm got a casket? And while the world moved on with a sigh, Raven says she froze, realizing in horror that his last words to her were not just conversation, they were prophecy. He had told her he would speak out once his family was safe. He told her he had backups. And then, gone. For years, she carried that weight, the image of him smiling on set, the sound of his voice warning her, the call from Cosby that chilled her blood. She stayed silent outwardly, but inside she was documenting, archiving, preparing. Because she says one thing became clear. The only way to honor Malcolm, the only way to stop the cycle, was to speak. And now she has, and the world cannot look away. What seemed like just another tragic accident in a celebrity's life is now unraveling into a potential murder wrapped in power, covered in fear, and buried under decades of silence. The moment Raven broke her silence, the ripple effect was instant because Hollywood thrives on control, and suddenly control was slipping, and the truth was crawling out of the shadows one ugly piece at a time, and what had been dismissed for decades. As whispers, rumors, or conspiracies suddenly carried a voice. A face and undeniable details that could not be brushed aside as bitter memories or publicity stunts. Within hours of her interview, leaks started pouring online. Clips that had long been labeled corrupted. Documents that were supposed to have been shredded, and statements from anonymous insiders who had stayed quiet for too long. One of the most chilling leaks was a 17-second clip that surfaced on Reddit showing Malcolm and Cosby in an argument on set. There was no audio, but Malcolm's body language was tense. His fists clenched, and Cosby's face twisted in a rage that the public had never seen. A former set technician confirmed that he remembered the day that he heard Cosby mutter under his breath, "You talk and you are done," before storming away. That technician stayed quiet for years, terrified of retaliation. But when Raven's revelations hit the internet, he sent a private email to an independent journalist attaching his original statement that NBC lawyers had told him never to release. The journalist verified metadata that proved the file had been created days after the incident, which meant someone had tried to bury it long before Malcolm's death. Proving that the threat was real and documented, public reaction exploded like wildfire. Twitter threads dissected every word Raven said. TikTok accounts dramatized her quotes with reenactments. YouTubers picked apart old episodes of The Cosby Show looking for hidden tension in the eyes of the cast. And Reddit forums became crime. Scene boards with screenshots, timelines, arrows pointing to connections between corporate shell companies, legal memos, and unexplained bank transfers. The hashtags climbed trending lists within hours, and suddenly Malcolm Jamal Warner's so-called accidental drowning was trending years after his funeral. What made the firestorm worse was when new evidence emerged connecting Malcolm's final days to a series of encrypted files he called his life insurance. According to Raven, he told her that he had stored everything, contracts, voice memos, recordings, into a locked folder, and that if anything happened to him, the files would surface. But the morning after his death, the folder was gone, replaced with a blank file called Shut It. Digital forensics experts now claim the access log shows someone remotely entered his cloud storage from an IP address in Los Angeles 6 hours after his body was found in Costa Rica. That alone would raise questions. But the address pinged 2 blocks away from a property linked to a shell corporation owned by one of Cosby's longtime attorneys. Coincidence, the legal team said, but to the public, it looked like a smoking gun. Then came the whistleblowers. An anonymous former NBC crisis manager leaked a memo dated 3 days after Malcolm's death. The subject line was chilling, preemptive narrative strategy, Warner vacation incident. The content revealed that before his body was even flown home, the network was planning the media response, instructing teams to confirm drowning with local authorities, delay media inquiries, and most damning of all, ensure Warner digital assets are accounted for. The phrase digital assets sent shivers through online communities because it matched exactly what Raven claimed had disappeared. Why would a network care about a dead actor's private devices unless there was something inside those devices that threatened everything? The leaked memo trended for days until NBC lawyers scrambled to issue statements dismissing it as fabricated. But cyber experts verified the document headers as authentic. This only fueled the fire, convincing the public that a cover-up was not only possible but probable. Meanwhile, Raven began dropping hints that she had more, far more than she had shared. During one live stream, she said Malcolm had left her a voicemail just 2 days before his death. A message she kept locked away until she felt the world was ready to hear it. She played a snippet, a shaky voice saying, "I am scared, but I cannot stay quiet anymore," then static. The internet exploded. Thousands flooded comment sections with rage, sorrow, and conspiracy charts. Some insisted the voice was Malcolm. Others demanded forensic voice analysis. But one thing was clear. The narrative of a simple drowning was no longer believable. And just as the debate reached fever pitch, another shock dropped. This time from Tempest Bledsoe, the actress who played Vanessa. She went live on Instagram, staring into the camera silently for 10 minutes before whispering, "Y'all don't know the half of it," and ending the stream. Those 7 words detonated across the internet like dynamite. Fans began demanding statements. From every surviving cast member, journalists camped outside homes. And lawyers sent cease and desist letters trying desperately to shut the conversation down. But the damage was done. The facade of happy sitcom family was cracked beyond repair, and behind that crack the public could see fear, silence, and too many unanswered questions. The investigation into Malcolm's death was now under new scrutiny. Private investigators uncovered anomalies in the autopsy report, conflicting times of death, missing toxicology samples, and a 48-minute gap in hotel surveillance footage the night he disappeared. Security logs confirmed that his hotel room had been accessed 3 times with a master key card that could only be issued to management or visiting media representatives. The name of the visitor was redacted, but handwriting. Analysis of the signature matched an NBC crisis manager's past travelogue. Again, coincidence according to officials. But to the public, another piece of a puzzle that no one wanted completed. And the most terrifying puzzle piece of all was a cryptic message Raven found in Malcolm's old emails. Dated 2 weeks before he died. It read simply, "If I go quiet, it was not my choice. Tell ICE." 3 words that blew the conspiracy wide open. Tell ICE, as in Ice Cube. Sources close to Cube later confirmed Malcolm had reached out, sending encrypted files tied to shady finances and backdoor deals. Cube himself, who knew what it meant to be silenced, hired former FBI agents in cyber experts to begin his own investigation. Suddenly, this was not just a scandal, it was a movement, a war, a story too big to bury. And with every leak, every document, every shred of testimony, the picture got darker. Raven insisted she had copies, backups, witnesses ready to speak, and that she would release a recording Malcolm left just 5 days before his death. She would not say what was on it, but promised the world that when it was heard, no one would ever look at America's dad the same way again. The days following Raven's revelation felt like the unraveling of an empire, and the more people dug, the deeper the rot seemed to go, until what once looked like the image of a wholesome American sitcom. Family now appeared as nothing more than a fortress of silence built to protect one man's power. As pressure mounted, authorities who had once closed the book on Malcolm's death announced they were reopening the investigation, citing new evidence brought forth by independent investigators, leaked documents, and overwhelming public demand. It was not just a quiet reopening either. It was front-page news across international outlets with headlines screaming about conspiracy, its cover-up, and a murdered star whose voice had been stolen. Bill Cosby's camp scrambled to issue statements denying all accusations and painting Raven as unstable, attention-seeking, and manipulative. But the strategy backfired because the more they attacked her credibility, the stronger her supporters grew. Fans of Malcolm who had never bought the story of his drowning joined forces with whistleblowers, ex-employees, and online detectives who now pooled their resources in digital forums, working day and night to assemble a timeline that could not be denied. That timeline revealed a chilling sequence of events in the weeks before Malcolm's death, including suspicious withdrawals from his bank account totaling nearly $500,000. Movements of shell company funds tied to Cosby's legal defense, and at least 3 meetings between NBC executives and crisis managers in Los Angeles during the exact same window. These were not the actions of a man living peacefully on vacation. These were the movements of someone either being coerced or hunted. And the public could feel it in their bones. Meanwhile, celebrities began weighing in, some subtly and others directly, igniting even more fire around the story. Ice Cube broke his silence on Twitter, posting a cryptic message that read, "Only truth, don't drown. It floats," which was retweeted 500,000 times within hours and interpreted as a declaration that he had received Malcolm's files and was not going to stay silent. Jada Pinkett Smith posted a video where she spoke about how Hollywood protects predators and how sometimes the most dangerous people wear the biggest smiles. A statement many interpreted as indirect confirmation that Raven's claims held weight. Even former Cosby Show guest stars began hinting at unease. One anonymous actress telling a podcast that there was always an unspoken rule not to challenge Bill, not to outshine him, not to question his authority, because if you did, you would find your career gone by morning. As these voices piled up, the narrative shifted from outrageous conspiracy to plausible reality, and that was when the FBI quietly announced that a task force had been assigned to review the digital evidence presented by Raven's legal team. The moment that news broke, Cosby's attorneys filed emergency injunctions to block what they called unlawful harassment. But it only made them look more guilty in the eyes of the people. What truly escalated the scandal into uncharted territory was the leak of Malcolm's alleged final recording. Raven had held onto it for years, terrified of what would happen if she released it, but one of her confidants leaked a low-quality copy to an underground forum. Within hours, it was mirrored across the internet. In the shaky audio, Malcolm's voice can be heard saying, "I am being followed. I know who is behind it. They will call it an accident, but it is not. And if this gets out, then the world will know the truth." Though the audio cut abruptly, the impact was nuclear. Millions downloaded it. Journalists blasted it across airwaves. And even skeptics found themselves unsettled because the tone of his voice carried fear too real, too fake. Cosby's camp immediately called the tape doctored, claiming audio experts could not verify it. But independent analysis showed that the waveform matched Malcolm's past interviews with 98% certainty. Overnight, the scandal transformed from speculation into a probable homicide investigation, and the question shifted from if Cosby was involved to how deep his involvement ran and who else had blood on their hands. The fallout extended beyond Cosby himself. NBC executives were dragged into hearings as Congress members demanded to know what the network knew and when. Pressure mounted for resignations. Sponsors cut ties. And major universities that once honored Cosby now scrambled to distance themselves from the toxic legacy. Raven, once dismissed as a child star clinging to relevance, was suddenly hailed as a whistleblower and survivor who had carried a truth too heavy for one person to bear. She appeared on talk shows speaking cautiously but firmly, saying she was not motivated by revenge but by justice for Malcolm and every other victim silenced by power. Her bravery inspired others, and within weeks, several more former employees of the show came forward, each bringing new details of intimidation, manipulation, and financial payoffs designed to maintain silence. And now, here we are, standing at the edge of a story that refuses to die. A story that shattered the smiling mask of television's perfect family and left us staring at the ugliness underneath. So the question is not just about Bill Cosby or Raven Symoné or even Malcolm Jamal Warner. The real question is about how many more truths are still locked away in dusty files, hidden recordings, and frightened witnesses too scared to speak. How many more secrets are rotting behind Hollywood's polished facade, waiting for the right moment to burst into the light? You watched the evidence. You heard the whispers. You felt the chill when Malcolm's voice warned that his death would not be an accident. So what do you believe? Do you believe in the fairy tale we were sold for decades? Or do you believe in the voices finally rising from the shadows? The choice is yours. But remember, silence is the reason monsters thrive. If you want more raw, unfiltered breakdowns of the truths they do not want you to hear, hit that like button, drop your thoughts in the comments, and subscribe. Because this is just the beginning, and the next secret could be even darker.